Hey, hello! This is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of getting students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I work at IE Business School Publishing, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. So hello and welcome to Professor Game. We're back once again and now we're here with Sylvester Arnab. Sylvester is a reader in game science, a co-lead researcher in the Disruptive Media Learning Lab of the Coventry University, and a founder of the Beaconing Project. Sylvester, we met at Gamification World Congress at his talk. It was amazing. He has a very, very interesting project, which he'll be also expanding a bit upon today. But Sylvester, first of all, are you ready to engage?
Yes, I'm ready when you are.
Great to know that. So the first question that we have, Sylvester, is we want to know, what does a regular day with Sylvester look like? What do you do in your regular days?
Right. I will work at the Disruptive Media Learning Lab. It's very much looking at exploring and experimenting and practicing new methodologies for engaging teaching and learning. I'm working on different projects, like externally funded projects as well as projects which are funded by the lab. And so I travel quite a lot for work. But when I'm not traveling, my regular days normally start with setting myself some tasks of the day. And these tasks are normally associated with different projects, writing articles perhaps, and funding bids. And I will go through them and see how many I can complete in a day. So that is my checklist game, to get the tasks completed and get rewarded at the end of the day. Possibly a glass of vino while putting my feet up in the afternoon or in the evening.
So you set up your quests first thing in the morning.
Definitely. But sometimes things don't actually go my way. The Easter eggs of my daily routine, where I will have impromptu meetings with colleagues on various activities and initiatives that we are carrying out at the university, because this place is quite a dynamic place, so there are a lot of things going on. So it's quite difficult to try and hide from it, really.
So planning out is very important, but always leave some wiggle room, as Sylvester says, so that you can, have these meetings, get ready for the unexpected, for some things to happen. And most of the times it can be something very exciting.
Absolutely. The Easter eggs.
Easter eggs of the day, sure.
Yeah.
So the next question, remember that this part, in this section, we want you to tell us the story, right? So we're very focused on the story. If you have any NDAs or any names you can't name, don't worry. We're very focused on the experience and getting to learn something from this. So
yep.
We would like you next to tell us the story of the worst application of game thinking where you've participated in. Give us a story.
I think there's one story that I can tell. I engaged in a session that was talking about gamifying a course. It was quite an interesting experience, because the course itself was quite boring and quite text heavy, and the session wasn't gamified at all. But the person was actually trying to engage you in the fact that you can actually gamify your course, but no examples were provided, and the sessions were a bit dry. And I think at the end of the day, most people got very discouraged by the fact that how can you gamify a course if the session itself was not engaging like what was preached. So I think you need to practice what you preach, and in that particular case, it was not a good experience.
What is very important here, and I guess it's one of the main learnings that we can take from these engagers, is that you have to set expectations right. If you set expectations way too high, be careful. I mean, if you're going to deliver amazingly and you're sure that the experience is super amazing, go ahead, set super high expectations. But if you're not too sure, or if you know deep down that the experience is not going to be incredible, you have to be careful, because expectations make the experience. If people are expecting something super engaging, super dynamic, and you come up with a text-heavy, I mean, absolutely not gamified material, and people are expecting something gamified because that's what you're preaching. Well, you have to revise that session, or maybe say in advance, like, this is not going to be very gamified. This is not going to be the typical gamification you see, but this is something that we have to go through. For example, I am a strict and a firm believer that most of the things in this life can be gamified, especially in education. But if for whatever reason you are having a session that is not gamified, don't set the expectations as though you're going to be super interactive and super gamey. Because if you're not, everybody is going to be deceived, and they'll get a worse impression than they would have if in the first place you would have cleared up the expectations. What do you think was a main learning for you, Sylvester, in this case?
Main learning for me is to really understand the audience that you are trying to reach out to, and to really think simple, because the simplest methodologies and the simplest approaches that you take would engage your audience better. And that's what I learned from it. And I learned that you need to be very pragmatic and holistic in the way you design the experience. So you really need to know your audience and really know what needs should you address during any sessions or any solutions that you create based on gamification.
That's it. So, well, engagers, we have a few lessons learned from this. Don't make the same mistakes that somebody did before you. Learn from them and stand on the shoulders of giants. So, we're going to go to the next question, and this one has more to do with success. So, what's the biggest challenge that you have ever faced and solved using gamification or game thinking in general?
Because I'm working with staff across the universities as well as students, one of the biggest challenges that I faced was to create a space for staff and students to work together, forgetting the hierarchy and, my role is a lecturer, your role is a student, so you should listen to me type thing. So it was a great challenge, for me. So what I did was I created this holistic game thinking program where I would put lecturers and students together to create creative game products, whether it would be non-digital or digital-based. And I managed to use game design thinking for allowing them to collaborate and to partner where they could create anything they want as long as it is gamified. And it's quite interesting to see the change in roles in terms of the way they partner with one another, the way they engage with one another, the sort of language they use as well. So towards the end of the program, they were like colleagues. So that there is no hierarchy, and they sort of respect each other. They sort of learn a lot from each other, and the students learn about soft skills and how important it is to be able to communicate your ideas and being able to engage with people from different backgrounds, different age groups as well. So it's quite interesting. And there are different initiatives that we are doing in terms of trying to engage staff and students across the university, and they are collectively known as game changers, where we explore, experiment, and practice playful and gameful techniques, because I believe that we should practice what we preach, and this is where we try different techniques and try to understand them as a group of people that we want to engage in our program, and it seems that it's working well and breaking the barriers between lecturers and students, and so there is a great success in my
that sounds very exciting, because not only are you applying game concepts, gamification in general, but you're also letting the students themselves be creators of the content. Did I get that right?
Absolutely. Because I believe in that students should not just be a consumer of resources and contents. They should be co-curators as well and co-designers of resources, because this is how you learn, because you learn by designing, you learn by creating, and you learn different skills as you go through the process as well.
So in my life, to be honest, in my experience, I've realized that not only do you learn by going to your lessons and having a very good lecture, But when you have somebody who's struggling in your class, if you have the chance to approach that person and, give him a helping hand, it's always very nice. This core drive of social relatedness and helping others. It's always I think it's important. If you have the chance to approach him and help him out and give him maybe not some formal lessons, but help him run through the materials, explain to him a couple of things. When you actually get yourself to be in the position of teaching, you also have a privileged position because you are able to learn more. I mean, this has been proven throughout the years. This is something that I instinctively did throughout my university years. But I mean, honestly, quite recently, I've heard a lot about this. I've heard a lot about the creation of materials, teaching yourself to others. I mean, putting yourself in the position to teach others, to help others, so that you can yourself learn more. So this is like the perfect place where everything gets together. You're having a class that is very engaging. You have to learn through the materials because otherwise there's no way that you can create something for others to learn from that if you don't know the materials very well. So you're setting them in the perfect situation. They're learning a lot. They're learning even more than probably you would have originally expected, and you're also creating something that somebody else can use. I mean, I do believe this is a very magical circle in education.
Absolutely.
So heads up and take these kind of advantages, these kind of examples, and take action. Take action, because this is the kind of thing that you can actually implement in your own spaces. This is something that doesn't even need to be digital or very heavy relying on technology. Some things are very, very simple. There's very simple. You can start with simple games in general that are not focused on technology. And gamification can also not be necessarily focused on technology. This is something that you can use for your students to learn, your learners to be more engaged and to be focused on what they have to be focused. So thank you very much for that story, Sylvester.
No problem. And just to add to that, really, gamification is not referring to technology, but it is actually a design methodology that will allow us to create the experience for our learners. And I think it is a human-driven approach where we can understand our learners and then create the desired experience for them.
Very powerful. That's it. I'm completely. I mean, I couldn't support that phrase more. So, Sylvester, we're going to move into the next question, and it's regarding, because we're always curious about how do others go through this process, because there's some of our listeners who are already doing some of this, but there's also others who don't, and everybody can always profit from some experience from experts and from implementers like yourself. So the next question has to do with the process. All right, what's the process that you typically follow to apply gamification to a situation or to a learning material or to a learning experience or to education in general?
As I've mentioned before, our approach is very much pragmatic and holistic. It's a bottom-up approach in trying to make sure that we are not driven by technology, whether it's digital technology or non-digital technologies. So we have a 4-layer approach where we start with needs analysis that would lead to try to understand what types of activities that would address those needs. What are the different solutions that we can actually think of? And then we can take inspirations from the needs as well as the activities that we think would engage the learners, and we can experiment game design thinking on top of it, meaning that you would understand the needs as the first step, and secondly, you would be able to understand what types of activities that you can actually create to address those needs. And the 4th layer is, can we gamify it? Can we add a bit of play? Can we take inspirations from existing gameplay that we are all familiar with? Because our approach is you have to be very simple in your approach so that you will be able to engage your audience regardless of what age they are, because everyone has got connection with simple gameplay that they are used to when they were growing up. So from there on, you will be able to identify what types of technology that would help you to implement this gamified strategy. It can either be digital, non-digital, a collection or a suite of different tools that you can actually use. For example, what we're trying to do at the university is trying to create this hybrid approach of learning, as well as in the beginning project, which you mentioned in the beginning,
Yes.
a project which is funded by the EU Commission. what we are trying to do is to look at different tools that we can use, whether it will be physical tools, non-digital tools, digital tools, and see if we can connect the learning experience, extending from the classroom setting into the outdoor and into your home spaces.
So taking the learning not only from the classrooms, which is very important, but also taking it outside the classroom so that you can keep on learning even when you leave your class. Is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So there are so many different techniques and technologies that you can use, because I believe that you should not restrict yourself to one or two different types of technologies that you can use, because technology change with time and it changed so rapidly. So what we need to do is we have to make sure that we have a very strong idea of what experience that we want to create. So that's why by using this 4-layer approach, from the needs analysis to the activity design and the gamification and gameplay, and then you will decide on what technology that would help you to supersize the experience. So I think this is how we do it at the Disruptive Media Learning Lab.
Wow, sounds very powerful, yeah, and you have it pretty well thought out. So remember, engagers, the example that Sylvester has given us, the 4-layer approach, which starts as usual with knowing what the needs are, what are the objectives, what is it what you want to do with this experience. And always something that Sylvester has been telling throughout this interview, and I want to highlight very much, is to worry about the experience of your users, of your players. You have to focus on the experience and not on what technology you're going to use. So this is very, very important, very powerful, and I'm sure that if you take into account all this advice, you can do an amazing job at your learning materials. So Sylvester, let's move on to the next section of this interview here. We're going to be now less focused on the story and more focused on some practical tips and some very, very quick and practical answers, all right? So yep. The first one is, we would like you to name for us a best practice for gamification.
For me, can I say two? One is digital gamification and the other one is non-digital gamification.
Sure.
For digital gamification, I think I'm very intrigued with Fitbit. I think it is an interesting platform that merge it's such a hybrid experience that would engage you and help you to nurture, healthy behavior and attitudes. For a non-digital...
sorry to interrupt you, Sylvester, but what would you highlight of the experience from Fitbit? What do you think was something that we could maybe replicate, or what's a best practice that we could repeat on some other process from the learnings that we get from Fitbit?
Best practice for me is, I believe that sometimes extrinsic mechanics can help you to discover your intrinsics. So you will be able to nurture that behavior. You'll be able to nurture healthy habits, because sometimes when you're trying to reach the hard to reach, you will need to actually use different techniques in onboarding them to the system. And once they have found their own personal intrinsic motivations, they will be able to retain the habit and they will be able to continue with the healthy behavior. So this is quite similar to when you do learning as well. You need to find something that will onboard your learners. And once they are onboarded into the system and the programs, you would help them to discover their own objectives and their own intrinsic motivators that would help them to sustain their engagement.
So this is very related to, I think it was an article in the Octalysis group. I'm not sure where I read it. I know it was related to Yukai, but where he was saying that sometimes you do have to use some of these techniques, which he calls black hat, to actually get people to take action, because that's probably more immediate. Many times when you take into account the external motivators, the extrinsic motivation, sometimes it's a lot more immediate, and you need that immediate things to, to snap the fingers and get people going. And once you're going, once you're already running, you're on track, you say, well, now we have to take care of the long run. And you can take care of both things, but it's a very interesting point that you raise here, because maybe sometimes you use these extrinsic motivations to find out what are your intrinsic motivations and keep you basically on track. Because as we know, and as you've highlighted, sometimes extrinsic motivators are not good for the long run, but they help you explore which are the intrinsic motivators that help you keep a nice habit, like education, like learning, like there's many things that could be good for you, which you can discover through extrinsic motivators. So that's a very powerful, Sylvester. What's your tip on non-digital?
Non-digital. There is a project that I've been involved in for the past 2 years, and I think it is one of the a good example of non-digital gamification. The project is Erasmus Plus Playing for Real project, and it's been going on for the past 2 years. And what the project is trying to do is try to engage unemployed people from the age of 40 years old and above. Okay. Those who are qualified, but because of the economic downturn in the countries, so that they just couldn't get any jobs and stuff like that. So they are a bit scared, and they've sort of lost confidence in their own qualification and the skills that they've gained for the past few years. So what the project was trying to do is to create a program that would help them to discover different skills, to discover new knowledge about themselves, about what they can actually do, and not be restricted by the qualification that they have. Okay. So we created a gamified program, and the development was led by a company which is called Cookiebox, one of my good friends. And this program is not digital at all. It is a gamified leveling up program, 7 levels that will allow you to discover your weaknesses, your strengths, what you are anxious about, what you are angry about, and then that would help you to discover different things that you are good at. And from this experience, some of the social groups that we worked with, they managed to discover new skills, and some of them have been involved in creating businesses, creating sort of products that they sell in markets and stuff like that. So we could see the difference in the attitude in terms of they don't have to be restricted by their perceived skills. They have to discover new ways of looking after themselves and building a new career out of the experience that they had with us.
Well, like maybe Jane McGonigal, I'm sure she says pretty often, life can be a game. And if you think about it that way, it could be, for those non-gamers, RPG is a role-playing game where maybe sometimes in these games, for example, in video games, you're constantly leveling up your skills, and it doesn't have to do with age. Your character can be young, it can be an old character. You're still learning, and your skills can be continuously developing. I guess that what the experience that you has is almost turning the person into a game character, and you can see all these stats. You can see I'm very good at, for instance, I'm just making this up, I don't know, Microsoft's Office skills. I'm very good at talking to people, and I'm very good at negotiating. But if I also found a new skill, which the new skill is, for example, programming, maybe I could join these together and find something new. It's just like in a video game when you find all these new quests, they tell you, oh, you can't start this quest because you still need to have some programming skills. And then you go on and learn some new programming skills or level up some of your negotiation skills, for instance, and saying, well, now I'm ready to face up this new quest, this new challenge. And well, if you see it that way, then in not to take the seriousness out of everybody's life and maybe difficult situations that somebody might have, but it helps you to get encouraged and to realize what's your actual situation, where do you want to go to, and of course there's your solution. You had a big problem, which was unemployment, and maybe some people see it as a lot tougher when you're at that kind of age range. And there you go. You have new opportunities. You have new jobs. You have the experience, and you're at a magnificent new place. So Great example, Sylvester. Thank you very much. The next question has to do with what's your favorite game. This can be digital, non-digital. You can just name us whichever you are enjoying the most today.
Apart from hide and seek, which is a brilliant strategy game, my favorite game at the moment is called Black Box.
Okay.
This game is exploiting the power of curiosity and creativity. It is a more intrinsic approach where the game is trying to encourage players to think outside the box without any explicit rules or rewards. There is no game instructions, and it relies on players to explore the game and test different strategies to solve the different puzzles. And it's such an interesting game, and I just glued to it because I just couldn't solve a puzzle, and it took me about 3 weeks to solve it.
Wow!
And I managed to do it, and it was such, that feeling that you get when you manage to solve something, and wow, 3 weeks I managed to solve it, and you don't get anything from it, but it makes you feel good. It makes you feel that you have accomplished something.
Accomplishment, exactly. Always accomplishment feels good.
Absolutely. So try it out. It's called Black Box. It's such a fantastic game. You were glued. You'll be glued to your mobile phone.
So engagers, try it. Black Box. The next question is, out of the people, we've already had a couple of interviews, but who is somebody that you would like or to hear in Professor Game? Who would you like us to interview?
I think a very interesting professor who is called Jesse Shell.
Jesse Shell, the game designer. Yes.
Yes. Oh, he's fantastic. We always call him Professor Game. Because you can learn a lot of things from his work, and I think he would be such an interesting person to interview.
Sure, we'll get in contact with him. The next question, Sylvester, is what book would you recommend to our listeners, of course, related to gamification or game thinking?
Yep, I think in order for us to understand how to do game thinking in terms of how do you design experience by looking at gameful techniques, I think we need to understand the art of game design. It's not about creating digital games. It's all about trying to create that gameful experience. And I think, as a big fan of Jesse Shell, again, I think everyone should read The Art of Game Design, a book of lenses, which describes the most fundamental principles in game design and helps us to discover tactics which are used in board, card games, different types of games, even video games, and will give us perspectives on how to make better game designs faster.
So the Art of Game Design from Jesse Shell. That's a very, very good recommendation. We completely we recommend it very much. It's very useful. As Sylvester said, you don't need to be a gamer. You need to be more of a gamification designer. And the closest thing that we have, and the game mechanics, of course, come from games, is game design. So it's very, very, very recommended that you do read these kind of books. And of course, Jesse Shell's The Art of Game Design is very, very, very powerful for that. The next thing we would like to get from you, Sylvester, is an advice for our players, especially for those who have never engaged their learners using gamification or game thinking. What would you advise them?
Yeah. The root of game thinking is the fact that we acknowledge the power of play. So I believe that everyone should think of the feeling that you get when you are engaging with play and gameplay. How great would that be if learning or any other serious activities that we're doing, we can enjoy it as much and we are engaged in it as much as well, because play is innate and is very intrinsic. And gameplay itself, I think it allows us to understand engagement more and provide a structure to play for play to be measured in such a way that we would know what is the impact of play, what is the effect of play, what are the feedbacks that we can actually provide to those who are engaging in gameplay. And game thinking itself would provide a framework for us to continuously assess the players or the learners or anyone who are involved in the program, because we need to provide feedback that is useful and still maintain the autonomy and the agency in gameplay. So I think remember how you feel when you engage with gameplay. That is what we want everyone to feel when they are doing any other serious activities at work or at school or at university.
Great. That's great advice. Remember, because sometimes we do have skeptics, and I hope also skeptics are listening to us, that it's not only about video games. Some people say, well, but I'm not a gamer. You don't have to be a gamer for this. You just have to remember for example, if you have kids, you can see them playing, or you can remember when you played. Playing is a way of learning. So remember what you felt or what you feel when you're having fun, when you're at play, when you're free, when you can almost do anything you want. That's a state of flow, and remember that feeling, and think how you can implement something to get your learners into that same feeling, so that they're excited about what you're teaching. If maybe they're already excited because you're a great teacher, but how can you excite them even more and help them learn even more, or help your colleagues make your students be also very, very engaged. So that's a very, very good advice, Sylvester. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
This last question is randomly selected, although it was previously curated, but it came from our audience, all right? So I'm going to read it to you. If you need any restatement, just let me know. It's this time we have a statistics professor, yes, and he says I am a statistics professor, and he says yes, it sounds very boring. But even though this is a tough subject, he says, I do reckon students need to learn the basics for their professional lives. And you as a researcher, I'm sure, Sylvester, you know this very, very close hand. So that being said, he says, I really look forward to having engaged learners who are eager to understand the topics we show. What would you recommend to get me started on the path of engagement with my students?
This is an interesting question because a few weeks ago, I discovered this book, which is a role-playing game book for statistics.
Wow.
So it's like choose your own adventure type of book where you would discover different adventures, and then you would have to use statistics to solve those problems in order for you to level up. And I think you can actually use the same techniques. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be digitized. What you need to do is to create a narrative around the teaching and the learning of statistics. You can use existing techniques. For example, you can even use escape rooms where people would solve puzzles in order to find a key to a lock or a PIN number to sort of like something. So because you are working with numbers, so you can actually create puzzles that will allow them to apply the different statistical methods for them to discover those numbers. And you could actually use different techniques in, say, mystery boxes as well. You can send boxes around with different puzzles, and different puzzles can actually link with different students so that they can complete the bigger mystery in terms of stats. I think essentially it's all about creating that narrative, creating that story that students can play a role in solving problems and solving puzzles, because we are doing it here at the university where we are actually using mystery boxes, we are using escape rooms, we are using crystal maze, if you are familiar with the concept, in trying to get students to engage with boring subjects.
Those are the hardest ones.
I know it's hard, but if you can embed those puzzles and embed those questions and embed problems within engaging narratives, it'd be fantastic. I think that's why I encourage arts and design to be included in STEM subjects. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. So I think we need to have a bit of creativity and a bit of art in the way we teach to make it more engaging.
Sure, so very good advice. Well, it's now time to say goodbye. So the last question, so to speak, is how can we connect with you, Sylvester? Some quick final advice, and then we'll say game over.
Right, you can tweet me at SARNAB75, or you can just find me on LinkedIn, Sylvester Arnab. So I think that is the best way to get in touch with me.
Great, and
my final advice, I think play and explore and be inspired. Remix the mechanics of gameplay and the design of learners. Your audience or your learners experience, I think it is key to keep on playing, to keep on exploring, and to keep on engaging ourselves with gameplay before we engage our audience or our learners in gameplay.
So thank you very much, Sylvester. That was we had some amazing stories. We had some amazing counsel. So take action, engagers. If you want to get in touch with Sylvester to know maybe something else, you have some specific question, well, head over to Twitter and find him at sarnab75. He'll probably be there waiting for your questions. He'll be very happy to answer some of them. So get in touch. If he's given out a way to contact him directly, so you can have the chance to use it. And thank you very much in general for the whole interview, for everything you've given us, Sylvester. And we'll meet soon.
It is my pleasure, and thank you very much. And I hope that everyone has found some useful takeaways from the session.
Sure. So until next time, game over. Hey, engagers! Thank you again for listening to Professor Game Podcast. I love your feedback and I would like to get some of that. So please go to professorgame.com/subscribe and subscribe to our email list. You'll receive an email from us, and please hit reply and let me know what you think of the show. Your feedback is super important because in the end, everything we do in the show is to share it with you and to know how we can make the show better for you, more useful. Before you click continue to your next mission, would you like to know how Professor Jarrett Chapman would introduce gamification into high school? Yes? Well, then listen to the next episode of Professor Games. See you there!